The first time Jason laughed at me, he did it in front of his sister. He put one hand on my shoulder, squeezed like he was being friendly, and said I was a cute little kid with grease under my fingernails and a crush bigger than my body. Then he looked at Audrey and told her not to worry, because I would grow out of it the way boys grow out of comic books and cheap sneakers. Everybody laughed except me. My name is Harvey, and at 14 I learned that being poor was bad, being young was worse, and being in love with a girl who could see both things on your face was almost unbearable. They thought that laugh ended something in me. It did not. It planted something. My parents had been separated for long enough that I barely remembered what a peaceful dinner sounded like. After my dad left, Mom held everything together with coupons, overtime shifts, and that exhausted smile parents use when they are one bill away from falling apart. Then she found a rental on a quiet street outside Columbus, Ohio. That was where I met Audrey. She lived next door with her mother Diane and her older brother Jason. She was 17, 3 years older than me, and to a 14-year-old boy who owned 2 pairs of jeans and worked weekends sweeping a hardware store, 3 years felt like a different country. Hannah became friends with her almost immediately, which gave me excuses to pass Diane's porch and hear Audrey's voice. At first, Audrey was kind to me. That made everything worse. She asked about school, smiled when I carried groceries, and once wrapped a paper towel around my cut knuckle like I mattered. I thought kindness meant a door was opening. I did not know kindness could be the softest way someone kept you outside. Jason started dating Hannah that fall, which meant he was around our house all the time. He was 19, loud, confident, and always wearing cologne that arrived before he did. He had a used black Mustang, a tire shop job, and the kind of confidence that comes from being old enough to impress teenagers and immature enough to enjoy it. He treated me like a little brother when people were watching, but there was always a hook under it. He called me kid, short stack, and once Audrey's future stalker. One Friday evening, Hannah, Jason, Audrey, and a few friends were sitting in our driveway while I worked on my bike. Audrey had come over in a yellow sweater, and I remember that because I could barely look at her without forgetting what my hands were doing. Jason caught me staring. He said, right there in front of everyone, that I looked like I was about to ask his sister to prom. I tried to laugh it off, but Hannah made it worse by saying I had been in love with Audrey since the day we moved in. She did not say it to be cruel. She was my sister, and sisters sometimes think embarrassment is harmless if they are smiling while they do it. Jason slapped my shoulder and said Audrey needed a man, not a babysitting job. That was the first time Audrey looked away, not because she was mean. That would have been easier. She looked away because she felt sorry for me, and pity hurt more than a direct insult. I wanted the driveway to open and swallow me, bike tools, greasy hands, cheap sneakers, all of it. But the next morning I still woke up thinking about her. A few weeks later, I saw her climb off the back of a motorcycle in front of Diane's house. The guy driving it was older, with tattooed arms and a leather jacket he clearly wanted everyone to notice. Audrey laughed, touched his shoulder, and walked inside. I hated him before I knew his name. His name was Blake, and when Hannah told me they were just talking, I grabbed onto that phrase like it was proof. Just talking, not dating. Not serious, not impossible. That kind of hope can make a fool feel rich. That December, Jason invited Hannah to a small Christmas carnival downtown, and somehow Audrey, a few friends, and I all ended up going too. A man near the courthouse was selling single roses wrapped in plastic. I bought one. It took almost every dollar I had. When I handed it to Audrey, she looked surprised first, then sweet, then uncomfortable. She thanked me, and for one wild second, I thought that was enough. Then Jason saw it. He asked if I had taken money from my lunch account to buy his sister a flower. A couple of people laughed. I told him I bought it with my own money. He raised both hands like he was impressed and said, "Look at that, the little man has wages." Audrey told him to stop. Later that night, I borrowed a pen near a hot chocolate stand and wrote one line on a napkin. "Do I have any chance with you?" It was the bravest thing I had ever done, and also the most humiliating. I slipped it to her when the others were distracted. She read it, folded it once, and put it in her coat pocket without answering. For 3 days, I lived off that silence. Then Hannah came into my room and closed the door behind her. She had that careful look people get when they already know they are about to hurt you. She said Audrey thought I was sweet, really sweet, but I was too young for her. Too young, not cruel, not angry, not disgusted, just too young. I nodded like I understood, because pride is sometimes the last shirt you own, and you wear it even when it is full of holes. Hannah sat on the edge of my bed and told me I needed to let it go. I said I would. I lied. The next week, Blake started showing up more often. At first it was just the motorcycle in the driveway, then it was his jacket hanging over the porch rail, then it was his hand on Audrey's back while they walked to his bike. Every time I saw them, something in me tightened. Jason enjoyed that too. One afternoon when Mom was working late and Hannah was upstairs, Jason caught me in the kitchen making a sandwich and told me his sister liked men with wheels that had engines, not boys with bikes that squeaked. I told him to shut up. He laughed so hard he almost dropped his drink. Then the whispering started. It began with Mom and Hannah in the kitchen. I was in the living room pretending to watch TV, but their voices dropped in that way that makes you listen harder. Mom said Diane must be out of her mind letting that girl make decisions so fast. Hannah said Audrey was scared. Mom said a baby was not something you handled by being scared and romantic. A baby. The word hit me so hard I forgot to breathe. I stood in the hallway until the floor creaked under my sock. Hannah turned and caught me. Her face changed, and that told me everything before she said a word. I asked if Audrey was pregnant. Hannah told me not to get involved. That was not an answer. It was worse. Within a week, the whole street knew. Audrey was pregnant. Blake was the father, and Diane was pushing for them to get married before people talked any more than they already were. People still talked. Audrey went from the girl everyone admired to the girl everyone whispered about. I should have felt vindicated because Blake had trapped himself into adulthood before he knew what adulthood cost. Instead, I felt sick. The day Audrey moved into Blake's parents' house, I watched from behind our living room curtains. Diane cried on the porch. Jason paced like he wanted to hit somebody but did not know who. Audrey walked out last, one hand resting low on her stomach. She saw me through the glass. For half a second, we looked at each other. Then Blake opened the car door and she got in. That should have been the end of my stupid boyhood dream. Maybe for a normal person it would have been, but I carried it with me like a bruise I kept pressing, just to prove it still hurt. Months passed. Audrey came back to Diane's house sometimes, her belly growing under loose sweaters, her smile thinner each time. Once she came over to see Hannah while I was in the kitchen, and she asked how I was. I said fine. She said I had gotten taller. I said she looked tired. She laughed softly and said that was the nicest thing anyone had told her all week. I thought about that sentence for years. When her son was born, I saw her once with the baby in her arms and Blake beside her, looking proud in a careless way like he had won something just by standing there. I remember gripping the porch rail so hard a splinter went into my palm. I did not pull it out until later. When I turned 16, Mom moved us across town because the landlord raised the rent and she could not fight him. I told myself leaving would fix me. New street, new routine, new job, no Audrey next door, no motorcycle in the driveway, no Jason smirking like my humiliation was his favorite hobby. For a while it worked. I got a job after school at a repair garage run by a man named Frank. He was rough, quiet, and impatient with laziness, but he treated effort like currency. I swept floors first, then held flashlights, then learned brakes, invoices, parts orders, and the quiet math of keeping a business alive. Frank used to say most people wanted the sign out front, but the smart ones learned who owned the ground underneath it. By 18, I understood more than I let on. I still wore stained work shirts and came home exhausted, but Frank trusted me with vendor calls, lease documents, and property deals most grown men never saw. I kept my mouth shut and learned. Around that same time I met Megan. She worked at a small dental office near the garage and came in one rainy afternoon because her car would not start. She was practical, funny in a dry way, and looked at me like I was not a charity case or a kid trying to prove something. For almost a year I gave her the honesty she deserved. Megan met my mum, helped Hannah when she was sick, and made my life feel steady in a way I did not know I needed. That was why what happened next still makes me ashamed. Hannah called me on a Thursday night and asked if I remembered Jason. I almost laughed. People do not forget the first person who teaches them how humiliation sounds when other people laugh along. I asked why. She said they had started talking again. Nothing serious yet, she claimed, but her voice had that softness people get when they are already lying to themselves. Then she said Audrey had asked about me. I was standing in the garage office with an invoice in my hand. The paper bent between my fingers. I asked what she meant. Hannah said Audrey was back at Diane's place. She had separated from Blake, maybe for good this time. Jason told Hannah she had asked if I still lived around Columbus, if I was seeing anyone, if I ever mentioned her. I did not answer for a few seconds. Hannah said my name twice. That night, I should have told Megan everything. I should have said an old wound had opened, and I needed to be careful. Instead, I said nothing. I sat beside her on her couch while she watched a cooking show, and I nodded at the right times while my mind stood on a porch 6 years earlier, watching Audrey get into Blake's car. The past did not knock. It let itself in. A week later, Hannah said Jason wanted to get everyone together at a bar and grill near downtown. She said Audrey would be there. She said I could bring Megan if I wanted. I did not bring Megan. I told Megan I had to help Frank close the shop late because a supplier messed up an order. It was not even a good lie. It was just specific enough to sound boring. Megan kissed my cheek and told me not to work too hard. That kiss followed me all the way to the bar. When I walked in, I saw Audrey before she saw me. She was sitting in a booth near the back, wearing a black top, her hair shorter than before, her face older in a way that made her even more beautiful. Jason saw me first. He grinned like no time had passed and called me little man, but I was not little anymore. I was 6 feet tall, 20 years old, with mechanic's shoulders and hands marked by work. His grin faltered for a fraction of a second before he slapped my back too hard and told Audrey to look who finally grew into his ears. Audrey stood up and hugged me. It was brief, but it erased more progress than I want to admit. When she pulled back, she said I looked different, not like a kid anymore. Her eyes stayed on me just a little longer than they needed to. I should have left then. Instead, I sat down. At first, the night felt harmless. Hannah and Jason slid back into their old rhythm, pretending they were not already halfway to repeating the same mistakes. Audrey asked about my mum. She asked where I worked. I said I was at a garage. Jason jumped in before I could say more and said some things never changed because I still smelled like oil. Audrey told him not to be rude. Jason lifted his beer and said he was proud of me for sticking with my natural habitat. A few people laughed. I smiled, but I noticed something. Audrey did not laugh this time. She watched me like she was measuring whether the joke still hurt. It did. I just knew how to hide it better. When she asked if I was seeing someone, I said yes. She smiled, but it was smaller, tighter. She asked why I had not brought her. I said Megan was busy. Audrey nodded, then ran her finger around the rim of her glass and said she had wondered if I still remembered the rose. The whole room shifted. I asked what rose, as if I did not remember every second of that night. She looked at me and said the one from the Christmas carnival, and the little note. Jason groaned and said not that again. Audrey ignored him. She said she had kept the napkin longer than she should have. I felt something dangerous open in my chest. Jason got up to order another round. Hannah followed him because she never could let him walk away without going after him. That left Audrey and me alone at the booth, with music humming overhead, and my bad decisions gathering around me like smoke. She told me Blake had made her life smaller every year. He drank too much, disappeared when bills came due, and blamed her for the baby, the marriage, and the years he lost. She said she had finally packed a bag because one night she looked at her son sleeping and realized she did not want him learning that love sounded like doors slamming. That sentence got under my skin. Then she said she used to think about me sometimes. Not all the time, not in some dramatic way, but in little flashes. The rose, the note, the way I looked at her like she was someone worth waiting for. Later, outside the bar, Hannah and Jason were arguing near his car. Audrey asked if I could walk her to the corner while she waited for Diane to pick her up. I said yes, too fast. The sidewalk was wet from earlier rain and streetlights turned the puddles gold. She thanked me for not judging her. I said I never had. She looked up at me then, and for a second I was 14 again and 20 at the same time, stupid in 2 different decades. She touched my arm and said, maybe I had always seen the best part of her. I wanted that to be true so badly that I ignored how rehearsed it sounded. When I kissed her, she kissed me back. It was not a long kiss, but it was enough to ruin the life I had been building. It made every warning in my head sound like background noise. Audrey pulled away first. She smiled like she was surprised by herself, then said we should not complicate things, but she did not sound sorry. The next morning, Megan texted that she missed me. I stared at the screen for almost a minute before answering. I told her I missed her too, and I hated myself before I even sent it. For the next 2 weeks, Audrey and I talked in fragments. A message late at night, a comment about an old memory, a call that lasted 11 minutes, then one that lasted 40. She told me her son liked dinosaurs. She told me Diane was driving her crazy. She told me Jason said I had turned into the kind of man nobody expected. I asked if we could meet again. She said soon. Soon became not tonight. Then maybe this weekend. Then she had to help her mom. Then her son was sick. Each excuse made sense by itself, but together they formed a shape I did not want to look at. Megan noticed first. She asked if I was tired of her. We were sitting in her car outside a grocery store, rain ticking on the roof, and I had just checked my phone for the 3rd time. I told her no. She asked if there was someone else. I lied again. That was the moment I became the kind of man I used to hate in other stories. A few days later, I ended it with Megan. I told myself it was mercy, that staying with her while my heart was somewhere else would be cruel. There was some truth in that, but truth can still be used like a mask. The uglier truth was that I thought Audrey was waiting for me to clear the path. Megan cried quietly. That was worse than yelling. She asked if she had done something wrong. I said no. She asked me if I was leaving because of someone from my past. I could not answer fast enough. She nodded once, and I watched respect leave her face. After that, I tried to see Audrey 3 times. The first time, she had a headache. The second, Diane needed the car. The third, she said she had plans she forgot to mention. Her messages stayed warm enough to keep me hopeful, distant enough to keep her safe. Then Hannah came to the garage. She did not usually visit me at work, especially not during closing. I was wiping down the counter when she walked in, arms folded, face tight. She said we needed to talk where no one could hear us. I took her into the back office. She asked if I had broken up with Megan. I said yes. She closed her eyes like I had confirmed something terrible. Then she told me I was making a mistake with Audrey. I said she did not know what was happening between us. Hannah said that was exactly the problem. Nobody knew what was happening between me and Audrey because Audrey made sure nobody could define it. I got angry because anger was easier than shame. Hannah told me Audrey had been seen with a guy named Derek from her gym. Not once, several times. She said Jason knew and acted like it was nothing. She said Derek was older, loud, always talking about opening his own fitness studio, always flashing money that did not seem to match his job. I told her Audrey was separated, not mine, and she could see whoever she wanted. Hannah looked at me and said, "Then why did she let you blow up your life?" That shut me up. That night, I called Audrey and asked her directly if there was someone else. She went quiet, then sighed like I was being unfair. She said Derek was a friend. Then she admitted they had gone out a couple of times. Then she said she did not owe me an explanation because we had kissed once, and I was the one who had turned it into a whole future. She said I had always done that, even as a kid, taken small kindness and built a house on it. She said she never asked me to leave Megan. She never promised me anything. She said maybe Jason had been right years ago, and I was still too young in the one place that mattered. I stood in the garage office with the phone pressed to my ear and felt 14 again. Then she added, almost under her breath, that she needed a real man in her life now, not someone still trying to prove he was one. I hung up before she could hear what that did to me. For almost an hour, I sat in Frank's office without turning on the light. The shop outside was closed. The lifts were still. The air smelled like rubber, oil, and old coffee. I wanted to call Megan. I wanted to call Audrey back. I wanted to go back 6 years and never buy that rose. Instead, I opened the stack of lease applications Frank had left on the desk. By then, Frank trusted me with properties as much as repairs. He had brought me into a small side business buying neglected commercial spaces, fixing them, and leasing them under a company name nobody connected to me. I still wore stained shirts. I still drove used vehicles. I still let men like Jason think I was just the mechanic kid. That was useful. The top application was for an empty storefront on Henderson Avenue, the old brick building with wide front windows and a parking lot big enough for a gym. The applicant name was Derek. The proposed business was a fitness studio. The listed partner was Audrey. My hands went cold. Stapled behind the application was a personal note Derek had sent to the leasing email, probably thinking some assistant would read it. He wrote that Audrey had a personal connection who could help influence the owner because the poor guy had been obsessed with her since childhood. He wrote that she could keep me friendly long enough to make the deal easier. Then came the line I read 3 times. He called me the mechanic idiot. I did not move. I did not blink. I just sat there with the paper in my hand while the whole story changed shape in front of me. Because Derek had just applied to rent the building I owned. For a second, I thought I had read the name wrong. I turned the application over, checked the property address, checked the company name, then checked Derek's signature at the bottom. Henderson Avenue, old brick building, Riverstone Holdings. The same building Frank and I had been fixing after work for almost 6 months. 1 broken window, 1 leaking pipe, 1 unpaid tax notice at a time. Derek did not know Riverstone was mine. Audrey did not either. Nobody from that old street knew Frank had made me a partner after I helped him save 2 properties from foreclosure. I was not some rich man from a movie. I still worked every day and still came home with oil on my hands. But quietly, legally, I owned 51% of that building. And the woman who had just told me I was not a real man was trying to use my old feelings to get inside it. Something in me went calm, not peaceful, calm in the way a room gets quiet right before a glass breaks. I read Derek's note again. He thought Audrey could keep me friendly long enough to make the deal easier. He thought I was still the boy with the rose, ready to lower the rent, waive the deposit, and hand him the keys to a business he planned to build on my embarrassment. He thought silence meant weakness. He was wrong. The next morning, Frank found me in the office before the shop opened. I showed him the note. He read it once, set it down, and said people like Derek were careless because they had never paid full price for arrogance. Then he asked if I wanted to deny the application. I almost said yes. But if I denied it too early, Derek would tell Audrey I was jealous. Audrey would tell herself I overreacted. Jason would laugh and say the mechanic kid finally threw a tantrum because the pretty girl did not pick him. They would still believe they had been above me. I told Frank I wanted to meet them. Frank said everything had to stay legal, clean, and documented. Then he leaned back and said, if they handed me the knife, I should not stab. I should just let everyone see whose hand was holding it. 2 days later, Audrey texted me like nothing had happened. She hoped I was not upset. Derek was intense, she said, but ambitious. Then she asked if I knew anything about a Henderson Avenue building that could change their lives. Their lives, not her son's life, not her future, their lives. I wrote back that I knew the building and could probably arrange a walkthrough. She answered in less than 1 minute. I knew then she had been waiting. That Friday afternoon, Audrey arrived with Derek and Jason. Jason came because, according to Audrey, he knew construction and could help with the layout. The truth was obvious before they reached the door. Jason wanted to watch. He had always enjoyed any room where he thought I would stand beneath him. Derek drove a white leased BMW and parked across 2 spaces, like rules were suggestions for smaller people. Audrey checked my face like she was trying to find the boy she could still manage. Jason slapped the roof of the car and grinned. He said the grease kid had keys to the castle. Derek laughed and asked if I was the maintenance guy. Audrey said my name quickly, almost too quickly, like she wanted to soften the insult without challenging the man who made it. She told Derek I was an old friend. Jason corrected her and said I was more like a neighborhood mascot who grew up. There it was again. Same rhythm, same smirk, same public little cut meant to remind me where I belonged. I unlocked the front door and let them walk in first. The building was not beautiful yet, but it had bones, high ceilings, old brick walls, wide windows, and enough space to make a fitness studio look legitimate if someone had real money behind it. Derek walked through like he already owned it, pointing at mirrors, private training rooms, and a neon sign with his name on it. Not the business name, his name. Jason wandered behind us, opening doors he had not been invited to open. He asked if the owner knew the roof needed work. I said the owner knew more than most people assumed. He smirked and said, "Owners always thought that until real men showed up with tools." Audrey looked embarrassed, but not enough to stop him. That hurt more than the insult. Halfway through the walkthrough, Derek asked how much pull I had with the landlord. I said enough to pass along concerns. He looked me up and down and said he loved that. A blue-collar connection, real authentic. Then he told Audrey that was why keeping good relationships mattered. Keeping good relationships. He said it while standing 10 feet from me, as if I were equipment already included with the lease. When I told him the owner required the standard deposit, proof of funding, insurance, and a signed personal guarantee, his smile tightened. He said startups needed flexibility. Jason added that I should tell my boss Derek was bringing energy to a dead block. Then Derek lowered his voice just enough to pretend it was private, and said Audrey had told him I used to have a soft spot for her. My jaw tightened. He said maybe I could use that soft spot for something productive this time. Audrey whispered his name. I turned toward her. She would not meet my eyes. There was the knife. I did not stab. I let it sit on the table where everyone could see it. I said all applicants had to be evaluated the same way. Derek smiled colder now, put one hand on my shoulder, and told me not to take business personally. That was the second time a man put his hand on me while trying to make me feel small. This time I removed it, not roughly, just firmly enough that he noticed. For the first time, nobody laughed. After they left, I checked the small camera Frank had installed to document contractor access. It had captured the walkthrough with audio, legal in that space, posted at the entrance with a small sign everyone had ignored, because arrogant people never think signs apply to them. I saved the file. Then the pressure started. Derek emailed twice that weekend. First, he praised the building. Then he asked to reduce the deposit by half and consider a relationship-based arrangement, because Audrey had personal history with someone connected to the property. Audrey texted Sunday night and asked if we could meet alone. I knew it was a bad idea. I went anyway because sometimes you need to look at the thing that fooled you and see it clearly under light. We met at a diner near Diane's house. Audrey arrived without Derek, wearing a beige coat and that careful, sad expression I remembered from years ago. She apologized because things had gotten awkward, not because she had let them use me. That was the first warning. She touched my wrist and talked about stability, her son, and how Derek believed in her when nobody else did. I asked if that was why she brought my name into the lease. She pulled her hand back. For a second I saw the calculation behind her eyes. She said she only told Derek we knew each other because she thought it might help me take the application seriously. I asked if she had read the note he sent with the application. Her face changed. That answered me before her mouth did. She said Derek wrote stupid things when he was excited. She said I should not let one dumb comment destroy a chance for her to build something better. Then she said, if I had really cared about her, I would not make this harder. There it was, not love. Leverage. I stood up and put money on the table for my coffee. She asked where I was going. I said I had cared about her for too long, and that was exactly why I was finally done letting her spend it. When I reached my truck, Jason was standing beside it. I should have known. He said Audrey was fragile and I needed to stop acting like some wounded hero. Then he stepped closer and told me I was just an employee with keys. If Derek lost that space because of me, he would make sure everyone knew I tried to sabotage Audrey because she would not sleep with me. He said Megan would hear it too. By morning, the story had already started spreading. Hannah called me crying and furious. Jason had told her I was blocking Audrey's business because I was jealous. He told Diane the same thing. Derek posted something vague online about small men with small power trying to stop ambitious people. Audrey did not post, but she liked it. That was her third mistake. Frank told me to document everything, so I did. Screenshots, emails, text messages, the video from the walkthrough, the lease application, Derek's note, Jason's threat summarized in writing and sent to myself with the time and location. Every piece went into a folder, but the worst blow came from Megan. She texted one sentence, I heard what people are saying. I hope it was worth it. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Then I typed the truth. I told her she had not deserved what I did. I told her I had lied, and whatever people were saying now, my first wrong choice had been mine. She did not answer. That silence was fair. A week later, Derek submitted revised documents. The funding letter looked cleaner, the projected revenue looked inflated, and the personal guarantee had Audrey's signature on it. That caught my attention because her signature looked different from the one on the first application. Frank noticed too. We sent it to our attorney, Denise, who emailed Audrey directly, asking her to confirm she understood the personal guarantee made her financially responsible if the business failed. Audrey called me 12 minutes later. Her voice shook. She asked why the attorney was emailing her. I said because her signature was on a personal guarantee. She said Derek told her it was just for business planning, not liability. She asked if she could get in trouble. I told her to call a lawyer. She said I sounded cold. I said cold was what people called you when manipulation stopped working. She hung up. That was when the business deal turned into something bigger. Derek was not just arrogant, he was dangerous. Maybe Audrey had been using me, but Derek was using her too. That did not erase her choices, it did not make her innocent. But it changed what I had to do next. Frank and Denise set a formal meeting for the following Thursday. Derek was told the property owner would be present to discuss final terms, funding concerns, and the personal guarantee. Audrey was required to attend because her name was on the application. Jason came too, not because he had any legal reason, but because men like him love rooms where they expect somebody else to be embarrassed. The meeting was held inside the building itself, at a folding table under temporary lights. Derek arrived in a navy blazer. Audrey came in pale and quiet. Jason walked in last, carrying coffee, grinning at me like the show was about to start. Diane came with Audrey, and Hannah came because my sister needed to see Jason clearly. Denise sat at the table with a folder. Frank leaned against the wall near the windows. I stood near the back, wearing a clean work shirt with my name on it. Jason looked at me and said he hoped the real owner would not mind the help hanging around. Nobody answered. Derek started strong. He gave a speech about vision, discipline, community, and turning a forgotten building into a place people could be proud of. Then he slid into pressure. He said delays were expensive. He said he had investors waiting. He said he had been told someone connected to the building had personal feelings complicating the process. Everyone knew he meant me. Jason added that some people never got over being rejected in high school. Audrey closed her eyes. Diane looked confused. Denise opened her folder and asked Derek whether he had submitted the note attached to the original application. He said yes, but it had been casual. She asked if he had referred to an employee of the property company as a mechanic idiot. Derek's face hardened. Jason laughed once and said it sounded accurate. That was when Frank stepped forward. He said Harvey was not an employee of the property company. The room went still. Jason's smile held for one extra second, then disappeared. Frank nodded toward me and said Harvey was the managing partner of Riverstone Holdings and majority owner of the Henderson Avenue property. He said every decision involving the lease required my approval. Nobody spoke. Derek blinked like the room had tilted. Jason looked from Frank to me, waiting for somebody to laugh and restore the world he understood. Audrey stared at me with her mouth slightly open, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked at me without pity or strategy. She looked at me like I had become a door she did not know was locked. I sat down at the head of the folding table. Denise continued. She explained our concerns. The funding documents, the attempt to seek preferential treatment, the recorded comments, and the unclear circumstances around Audrey's personal guarantee. Derek tried to interrupt. Denise raised one finger and kept talking. Then she played the audio. Derek's own voice filled the empty building. Blue-collar connection. Soft spot. Use it for something productive. Maintenance guy. Mechanic idiot. Nobody needed to interpret anything. It was all there. Jason tried to laugh it off, but it came out thin. Diane turned toward Audrey and asked if she knew. Audrey whispered that she did not know about all of it. Derek snapped that she knew enough. Then, right in front of everyone, he made the mistake that finished him. He told Audrey she would still be living in her mother's spare room if he had not given her a plan. The room changed. I saw Diane stand up straighter. I saw Hannah look at Jason, then at Audrey, then back at Jason like something ugly had finally become clear. I saw Audrey flinch, not because Derek was lying, but because he had said out loud what he usually dressed up as ambition. Denise placed the personal guarantee on the table and asked Audrey if she had knowingly signed that exact document. Audrey stared at the page. Then she said no. Derek exploded. He said she was confused. He said she signed everything. He said women always panicked when real business got serious. Frank told him to watch his mouth in our building. Our building. Jason heard it too. Derek grabbed the paper like he could pull the problem back into his hands. Denise told him to put it down. He did not. Frank stepped forward. Derek dropped it, but his face was red now, his control gone. That was the moment the man who had walked in like a future owner realized he was just an applicant with a bad file. I told him Riverstone was denying the lease. He stared at me. I said the denial would be sent in writing with documented reasons. Misrepresentation, attempted preferential influence, questionable guarantee, concerns about funding and conduct. Denise added that the guarantee issue would be referred to the appropriate parties if Audrey chose to dispute the signature or circumstances. Derek pointed at me and said this was personal. I said it became business the moment he put it in writing. Jason stepped toward the table and said I had set them up. I looked at him and told him I had spent 6 years being laughed at by men who mistook kindness for weakness and work clothes for failure. Then I pointed to the camera in the corner and said all I did was let them keep talking. His face went white. Hannah stood up. She asked Jason if he had threatened me outside the diner. He told her not to start. That was the wrong answer. She picked up her purse and said she was done being dragged back into his family's mess every time he needed an audience for his cruelty. Jason called her dramatic. She walked out anyway. That hurt him more than anything I could have said. Derek tried one last move. He turned to Audrey and told her they were leaving. Not asked, told. For years I had watched Audrey float towards stronger voices because she was afraid of standing alone. That day, for the first time, she did not move. She looked at the document on the table, then at Derek and said she wanted a copy. Derek cursed. Frank told him the meeting was over. Derek stormed out, slamming the door so hard one temporary light trembled. Jason followed him after one last look at me, but there was no insult left in his face, only disbelief. Audrey stayed. For a while, nobody spoke. Denise gathered papers calmly. Frank gave me a small nod and stepped outside to call the attorney handling the denial letter. Audrey looked at me and said she was sorry. I had imagined that sentence for years. When I was 14, I thought an apology from her would heal everything. When I was 20, I thought it might make me feel powerful, but sitting there in that half-renovated building, with dust in the air and her eyes full of tears, I mostly felt tired. I told her I believed she was sorry now. She winced because she understood the word now. She said she had not meant for it to become so ugly. I said ugly was not something that happened by accident after enough small choices pointed in the same direction. She nodded, crying harder. But I did not move closer. Comforting her had been my habit for too long, even when she was the one holding the match. Over the next 2 weeks, everything fell apart for Derek fast. His investors backed out after Denise's formal denial, and concerns reached them. Audrey disputed the guarantee with legal help Diane found. Derek blamed everyone publicly until enough people saw the documents and audio that blaming made him look worse. Jason tried to call Hannah for days. She did not answer. Then she learned he had been feeding Derek private family information, twisting my breakup with Megan and Audrey's situation into a story he could control. That ended whatever fantasy she had been rebuilding with him. As for Audrey, she did not disappear from my life in one dramatic scene. Real life is messier than that. She sent me one long message a week later. She admitted she had liked knowing I still cared. She admitted part of her had used that because she was scared, broke, and desperate to believe Derek was a way out. I read it twice. Then I answered with one sentence. I hope you build a better life without using someone else's heart as collateral. She did not reply. A month later, Riverstone leased the Henderson building to Carla, a woman opening a physical therapy clinic for kids and injured athletes. She brought clean books, real funding, and no one tried to touch my shoulder while asking for a favor. The day she signed, Frank handed me the keys and told me the building looked better with honest people in it. He was right. I also went to see Megan, not to win her back. I had no right to arrive with an apology and expect a reward. I asked if we could talk outside her office, and when she came out, guarded and tired, I told her what I should have told her from the beginning. I told her I had lied. Audrey had not made me hurt her. I did that. I was ashamed, and I knew shame did not fix what I broke. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said she appreciated the apology, but she was not ready to forgive me just because I had finally learned how to say it correctly. That one hurt. It also felt fair. Months passed. The building opened in the spring. Carla's clinic had blue letters on the windows, fresh paint on the brick, and kids coming in with braces and crutches. I stood across the street wearing the same work boots Jason used to mock and watched people walk through a door Derek thought he could steal with Audrey's smile. Frank stood beside me with 2 coffees. He asked if I felt better. I thought about Jason laughing in the driveway. I thought about Audrey folding my napkin. I thought about Megan crying quietly in her car. I thought about the folding table, the audio, the silence after everyone learned whose name was on the building. Then I said I felt older. Frank said that was usually what better felt like at first. A few weeks after that, I ran into Audrey at a grocery store. Her son was with her, taller now, holding a box of cereal against his chest. She looked tired but steadier. No Derek, no Jason, no performance. She said hello, I said hello back. Her son asked if I was the man who owned the building with the kids' clinic. Audrey looked embarrassed, but I smiled and said I helped with it. Audrey thanked me for not destroying her when I could have. I told her Derek did most of the destroying himself. She nodded and said she hoped one day I would remember something good about her too. I remembered the paper towel around my cut knuckle. I remembered the way she smiled at the rose before the world became complicated. People can be both the wound and the memory before it. I told her I hoped she took care of herself and her son. Then I walked away, not angry, not waiting for her to call my name, just walking. That night I drove past the old street where we had lived. Diane's porch light was on. Jason's Mustang was gone. Our rental house had a different family inside. For a moment I could almost see the boy I used to be standing in the driveway, waiting for someone older and beautiful to tell him he mattered. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to tell him not to hand people his worth and call it love. I wanted to tell him being underestimated would hurt, but it would also teach him how to move quietly and build something no one could laugh away. But maybe he had to learn it the hard way. Maybe some boys only become men after they stop begging the wrong person to see them. I pulled away from the curb and headed back toward the shop, toward the building, toward a life where I was not chasing a shadow from my past. And the strangest part was this. For the first time since I was 14, I did not wonder if Audrey would ever choose me. I wondered why I had taken so long to choose myself. What would you do in this situation? Be honest, or did this remind you of someone? Tell me in the comments. And if this made you think about your own relationship, I left something in the description that can help you build something stronger. Subscribe if you want more stories like this every day, and share this with someone who needs to hear this story.